Hello.
Hello. Yes.
How's it going?
Pretty good. How's it going?
It's all right. It's
Yeah,
working.
that's good. So, are there any questions? Anyone has any questions before we start? I guess not. Okay. Let's see. Hmm. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Good afternoon, everyone. Are there any questions before we start? Anyone has any questions?
Yes, Professor.
Yeah.
Is your office hour Monday from 3 to 4?
Yes, we will be starting this coming week.
Oh, no.
This week. Yeah.
No wonder I tried to get on yesterday. I cannot get on.
Yeah, because yesterday I had a few things that I needed to do, so I was not able to. But starting next week, that's when the office hours would start, Monday and Wednesday, from 3 to 4.
Oh, because on your announcement only say Wednesday. Oh, Monday and Wednesday. Yeah.
Yeah, Monday,
Okay.
Wednesday. Yeah, from 3 to 4.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other question? Okay, today what we want to do is we want to go over the chapter 2. In fact, we want to finish chapter 2 today. So on Tuesday, we have two things we want to do on Tuesday. We will go over the homework and we will start on chapter 3. So two things that we need to do on Tuesday. Okay, today we want to look at increasing opportunity cost, what it means, and why is it different from constant opportunity cost. Now remember, when we use the Ricardo Trade model, one of the assumptions in our model was that both countries only use labor, and labor is homogeneous. You know, what does that mean? That simply means that labor is of the same quality. So if a country is producing two goods, let's say autos and textiles, and if labor happens to be homogeneous, this simply means that I can take labor out from auto and put them into textiles, and they will be as effective as they were when they were producing autos. Also, I can take labor from textile and put them into autos, and they will be as effective as when they were producing textiles. So that's what we mean by the input being perfectly substitutable. You can substitute it between the two industries without having to lose a dime. You don't lose anything when you substitute labor from one industry to another. Why? Because labor is homogeneous, because labor is perfectly substitutable, because labor can do a good job in both industries, as good a job as any other labor. That's constant cost. That's constant opportunity cost. That's the reason why we said that if the US, for example, wants to increase the production of automobile, the opportunity cost of automobile will always stay the same, regardless of how many units the US produces. And if you remember last time from the example that we used, China, the US, textiles, and automobiles, we found that the opportunity cost for the US for producing automobiles was 2 yards of textiles given up. And that opportunity cost will stay the same, whether the US decides to produce 10 automobiles or 1 million automobiles. The opportunity cost will stay the same. The US will always have to give up 2 yards of textiles for each additional auto produced. That's what we mean by constant opportunity cost. And the same thing applies to China. The China also faces constant opportunity cost in producing textiles. Now, when we relax this assumption of labor being homogeneous, in other words, now we say labor is no longer homogeneous, but labor is specialized. In other words, you cannot perfectly substitute labor between the two industries. Why? Because the labor that is used in textile, they're highly efficient and productive in producing textile. And the labor that is used in automobile is highly productive and highly efficient in producing automobile. So you have a certain amount of labor in textile, a certain amount of labor in auto. Now, if one country decides to produce more of one good, let's say the US now decides to produce more auto, that simply means that the US now has to take labor out from the textile and bring them into auto. Now, when the US does that, and when it brings labor from the textile to the auto, that labor is not as efficient and productive as the labor that is already in the automobile industry. Therefore, now, the opportunity cost of producing automobile will increase when you increase the production of automobiles. Because it's going to cost you more. Because the labor that you brought in is not as productive as the labor that you already have. So now the production cost of automobile is going to rise. And this is what we call increased opportunity cost. And this happens both in the US and in China. Why? Because both of them are facing increased opportunity cost. Because both of them are facing a labor that is not homogeneous. A labor that is not of the same skills. That for you to help them become more efficient in producing autos, you have to train them. You have to spend money on them. So the cost is going to increase for you when you produce that additional auto. Same thing for China. China will do the same if they have to increase the production of textiles. Why? Because they have to take workers from the auto, put them into textiles. But those workers are not as efficient, so they have to train them. They have to go through the process. It's gonna cost them more. That's what we mean by increased opportunity cost. Now, when we have increased opportunity cost, this will change the PPF for each country. So instead of having a straight line PPF for each country, that straight line PPF represents constant opportunity cost, simply because the slope of the PPF is the opportunity cost, and the slope of a straight line is constant. But now when we're talking about increased opportunity cost, we cannot have a straight line anymore, but the PPF now would look something like this. It's bowed out, it's concave. So for example, if the US decides to produce, let's say, 40 automobiles, the opportunity cost of producing that 40th automobile will be determined by the slope of the PPF at this point of production, point A. That's where you're producing, right? You want to produce 40. So you're going to be right here on the production possibility frontier. To find the opportunity cost of producing the 40th automobile, I have to draw a line that is tangent to the PPF at that production point. And then calculate the slope of that line. The slope of this line will give me the opportunity cost of producing the 40th automobile. Now, if I decide to produce a little bit more, so instead of 40 now, I want to produce 80. And I want to find out what is the opportunity cost of producing the 80th automobile. Again, I have to draw a line that is tangent to the production possibility frontier at that point of production. So this is my tangent line at this production point. And from here, all I need to do is simply find the slope of this line. And the slope of this line will tell me the opportunity cost of producing 80 automobiles. Now, if I want to find out what the opportunity cost of producing the 20th automobile, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to go all the way up to the production possibility frontier that corresponds to that 20 autos I'm producing. And then I'm going to draw a line that will be tangent to that point of production. And the slope of that line will tell me what the opportunity cost is. So this is basically how this is done. Now, one of the things you can see from here is that the slope of these lines, which represents the opportunity cost of producing at each production point, happens to get steeper as we produce more and more automobiles, which tells me that now I'm dealing with increased opportunity cost. I am no longer looking at a constant opportunity cost. So the bowed out PPF or the concave PPF reflects increased opportunity cost. Is this clear so far? Any questions on that?
No, no
Okay,
question.
very good. Now, the thing that we have to answer, or the question that must be answered is, how do we know where a country should produce? Now, remember, before, when we looked at the constant opportunity cost, it was very simple. Complete specialization. The US has a comparative advantage in auto. The US will only produce autos. China has a comparative advantage in textiles. China will only produce textiles. In other words, there is complete specialization by both countries. And then they will decide to trade with one another. But in our case here, where opportunity costs are increasing, we know that complete specialization is not possible. Only partial specialization will be possible. And the reason is very simple. The reason why complete specialization is not possible is simply because if the US decides to produce at this point, complete specialization, the opportunity cost will be extremely, extremely high. It will be a lot more than the opportunity cost of automobiles for China. So then why would I want to produce all the way here and lose all of that money in high opportunity cost when I can actually buy all the extra autos that I need from China at a much lower opportunity cost? Doesn't make any sense, right? To produce right here, because the costs are gonna be infinite, basically. So it doesn't make any sense. Now, with the constant cost, it was very easy for the simple reason because the opportunity cost doesn't change. Whether you're producing one auto or you're producing 1 million auto, the opportunity cost stays the same. So this allows for complete specialization. But when we're talking about increasing opportunity cost, well, this obviously is going to pose a problem with complete specialization. Because if we choose that route, the complete specialization route, we will end up losing a lot of money. It's not wise economically It's not efficient economically to be producing only autos with your resources. So a country that faces increasing costs will have to decide to produce a little bit of both goods, meaning it will produce more of the good that it has a comparative advantage. Yes, but it will also produce some of the other good, because it's not going to be using all of its resources to be producing the good that it has a comparative advantage in, because it doesn't pay. But it will use most of the resources toward producing that good. And it will also use part of those resources to produce some of the other good that it has a comparative disadvantage in. The question here is, where should this country stop on its PPF? Where will it be most optimal to say, hey, you know, I want to be right here on my PPF, or I want to be right here, or right there, or right here? Where will a country decide where it's going to be on its PPF, and therefore where it will decide how much of each good to produce? This, of course, will be determined by the opportunity cost of producing autos at home. In other words, the domestic opportunity cost, the cost of producing autos at home versus the world price of autos, what the world market price of automobiles is. And the country will continue to produce more of autos as long as its opportunity cost is less than the world price. The country will stop producing automobiles at the point where its opportunity cost or domestic price is exactly equal to the world price. That's how each country will stop producing more of the good that they have a comparative advantage in. So it all depends. Yes.
Can you repeat that again?
Yes. A country will continue to produce more of the good that it has a comparative advantage in, all the way up until its domestic price or the opportunity cost of producing that good at home, its domestic price or the opportunity cost of producing that good at home is exactly equal to the world price of that good. When the world price is exactly equal to the domestic price, then that's where that country should stop producing more of that good. If that country finds that its opportunity cost of producing that good is lower than the world price, then it will continue to increase the production of that good. If its opportunity cost is lower than the world price, then it will increase the production of the good that it has a comparative advantage in. However, if this country finds that the world price is less than its opportunity cost, then it will reduce the production of this good. If it finds that the world price is exactly equal to its opportunity cost of producing that good, then it will stop right there at that point and says, okay, I have reached the optimal position. I'm not going to increase or reduce the production of this good. I'm right at the point where I want to be in. I have reached optimality. So again, what are we comparing here? We're comparing the opportunity cost or the domestic price opportunity cost and domestic price are exactly the same. I'm comparing the opportunity cost of the good with the world price of the good. That's what will determine how much of the good I will produce. Is this clear so far?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Now, how do I know the domestic price or the opportunity cost of the good? Simply by determining the slope of the tangent line. So if I'm producing right here, then the slope of this line would tell me exactly what the opportunity cost is. Now, let's say, for example, the terms of trade line happens to be this one, right here. And I'm producing right there. What does that tell me? Should I increase production or should I lower production?
Increase?
Very good, increase. Why? Because the domestic price or the opportunity cost is lower than the world price, because the world price is given by this line. Okay?
How do we know that the world price is
We will be
indicated?
given the world price. We will know what the world price is. We will be given that. Okay, now, let's go back to the example that we have, or we were looking at last time, China and the US. We said that the opportunity cost of producing autos for the US was 2. The opportunity cost of producing autos for China is 4. Remember that? The example that we had last time, you should have it in your notes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. And what did we say the world price would be of auto?
Was it 3?
3?
Very good. 3. Excellent. 3, which is between 2 and 4. And we chose 3. Now, we could have chosen any number between 2 and 4. I mean, we could have chosen 3.5 or 2.5 or 2.9 or I don't know. I mean, you know, we have many prices that we can choose from that happen to lie between the two limits. But we have to select one. And we chose 3 just to make things easy. We don't want to work with fractions, so I just took 3, basically. And that is between 2 and 4. So now I have the domestic price or the opportunity cost of producing autos for the US, which is equal to 2. And I have the world price of autos, which is equal to 3. So if I'm given these 2 situations that I'm dealing with an increased opportunity cost scenario, should the US increase its production? Or should it keep it the same? Or should it reduce it?
Increase.
Very good, increase. And I will keep increasing until when?
3.
Exactly, until my opportunity cost is exactly equal to 3. When it's equal to 3, I'm gonna stop right there. Why? Because my domestic price is exactly equal to the world price. So it doesn't pay for me to keep on producing more autos, because if I keep on producing more autos, this will probably go to 4. So why would I produce autos that's gonna cost me 4 when I can actually buy them in the world market for 3? Does this make sense?
Because the price of autos are going to go up.
No, the price of autos, the world, yeah, the price of autos, if you want to produce them at home, they're going to go up. And as I said, they will go up to probably 4, 5, 6, I don't know. But they will simply keep on going up the more autos you produce. But I know that the world price of auto is 3. So why would I produce more autos at home, very expensive, when I can actually buy them in the world market for only 3? So that's the reason why you're not going to do that. You're going to stop right there. You're going to keep on producing until the opportunity cost is exactly equal to the world price. When it's equal to the world price, that's it. You're going to stop right there. So that's basically what this increasing cost concept will do for countries that happen to be facing it. And the PPF, first of all, is no longer a straight line, but now it's concave. And second of all, we cannot completely specialize in the production of the good that we have a competitive advantage, but there will only be partial specialization, which would mean that we will end up producing both goods, because there is only partial specialization, not complete specialization. Now remember, of course, each country will continue to produce more of the good that they have a competitive advantage in. But they will stop producing that good that they have a competitive advantage in once the domestic cost of producing it is exactly equal to the world price of acquiring it. Is this clear?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let's look at this graph that you have here. We have 2 countries, 2 goods. US, Canada, wheat, autos. Now from here, the PPFs both reflect what? What do the PPFs reflect here? Come on, someone tell me very quickly.
Increasing opportunity cost?
Very good, increasing opportunity cost. And what does that tell me? Will I be able to completely specialize?
No.
Very good, no. So I have to produce both goods. Even after trade, both goods will be produced. Okay, so let's look at the US. Let's look at the autarky position of the US. Now, from here, we know that the US is going to have a comparative advantage in autos, simply because of the way the PPFs are drawn. But anyway, we don't have to worry about the shape or the way the PPFs are drawn to find comparative advantage, but we can find comparative advantage by simply comparing the opportunity cost of producing autos for both countries. That's the best way to do it. So, okay. Now, let's say that the US autarky position is at point A, and the US will be producing 5 autos and consuming 5, and the US will be producing 18 wheat and consuming 18. So at this autarky position, what is the opportunity cost of producing autos? That will be determined by the line tangent, correct? That's what we said. So all I need to do is draw a line tangent that just touches the point of production. So this is my line that touches it. And this will give me a slope of 0.33. So when the US is producing at this point, the opportunity cost of producing automobiles is 0.33 wheat that must be given up. Okay, now let's go to Canada and look at the autarky position of Canada. Let's say that the autarky position of Canada happens to be here. Now you may say, well, what are you doing here? I don't understand what's going on. How did I pick these points? Well, these points are picked up for us, unfortunately. There is really nothing we can do. The author has just decided that, hey, these are the author key points, so we got to go with that. Simply because the author may have more information than we do. The author may have more information on demand, utility functions, and difference curves, etc. And from there, the author was able to do his homework and come up with these author key positions. Okay, so he makes our work a lot easier, simpler. And we're not gonna complain. So we're gonna say, okay, these are the author key points. Now, our job is to find the opportunity cost of producing autos for Canada. So again, all I'm gonna do here is draw a line tangent to this production point. And this will give me a slope of 3. So now, who has the competitive advantage in automobiles?
USA,
Why?
because it's the lowest number,
What is the lowest number here?
0.33.
Versus?
Let me see. 3.
Very good. Yeah. Because the opportunity cost of producing autos for the US is only 0.33, whereas the opportunity cost for producing autos for Canada is 3. Therefore, the US has a lower opportunity cost of producing autos. Therefore, the US has a comparative advantage in autos. Okay. So the next thing the author does for us is the author would say, okay, based on these 2 pieces of information, what will the world price be if these 2 countries happen to trade with one another? Can you answer that question for me? Where will it be?
It has to be a number between 0.33 and 3.
Very good. Between 0.33 and 3. Very good. So we're really moving in the right direction here. Okay. The author has done his homework and came up with a world price of 1, which is between 0.33 and 3. So the author is telling us that the terms of trade line, the TT line, the world price line, the CPL line is 1 auto for 1 wheat for both countries, because that's the world price. 1 for 1. So now what we're going to do is we are going to pretty much draw that line of a slope of 1 around the PPF here, and also draw a terms of trade line for Canada around its PPF that is also equal to 1, because they have to be the same. So now I'm gonna come back to the US and say, okay, I'm at this author key position and I know I have a competitive advantage in autos and I wanna trade with Canada. So how many autos should I produce? And the answer to that would be, I would increase the production of autos until the domestic price, which is given by the slope of the PPF at that production point, is exactly equal to the world price, which is given by the 1 for 1, which is, this is the line that represents 1 for 1. So obviously at this point, I know that the domestic price, which is obviously a line that is tangent to this PPF point of production, is exactly equal to the terms of trade line, which happens to be right there, also tangent to point B. So I know point B will be my new production point after specialization. And I know from here that there is no complete specialization, but only partial specialization. In other words, the US is really not moving all the way down its PPF to produce only autos. It has stopped right there. Now, let's say if the US decides to produce right here. Okay, the US is not going to listen to reason and will continue producing and say, okay, I'm going to stop right there. That's still partial specialization. That is still not complete specialization. So I'm going to stop right here. If they do that, what would be the opportunity cost of producing that? That will be determined by a line tangent. So I'm going to draw a line tangent to that production point. And what would the opportunity cost be? Will it be equal to 1 or will it be greater than 1?
Greater.
Greater, because it's going to be steeper than this line, right? It's going to be much steeper because I'm going to have another line that would look something like that, which is obviously steeper than this one. So it doesn't pay for the US to go that route. So this is basically where the US has to stop. Why stop there? Because the domestic price of producing autos is exactly equal to the world price of autos. Everyone got that? Was the explanation clear or? Yeah?
Professor, how you get the 1A equal to 0.33W?
Okay, very good. How do we get the opportunity cost of producing auto to be equal to 0.33? Anyone?
It's
Don't we have
the
to find the slope?
slope of the autarky tangent line.
Very good, because that's the slope of the autarky tangent line. Because if I am producing at this point, then the opportunity cost of producing automobile will be determined by the line tangent to that point on the PPF, to that production point. So it's going to be 0.33. And for
You use the 5 divided by 18, that's not 0.33 though.
No. Why are you using 5 divided by how much? You said
18?
18?
Yeah.
Where did you get those from?
I think that it's just given the 0.33. It was confusing for me too. That is the slope of the round line, but there's no equation for the round line, so it's just given.
Oh, okay.
No, I can compute it for you. No problem. I can compute that.
Okay, please.
Yeah, I can compute the slope because now what you want to do is you want to compute the slope of this line right here, right? And in order to do that, if I knew the numbers, I could do it. In other words, I have to draw a triangle that will represent this tangent line right here. So I could either find this triangle right here, this little triangle, or I could find this larger triangle, go all the way up here, okay, and go all the way up there. And I can then find the slope by simply dividing this distance by that distance. That will give me the slope. Now for here, I don't have the numbers, of course, all the numbers, and I don't have a graph paper, because if I have a graph paper with numbers, I could do it very easily. But let's see if we can do it here by simply estimating. Let's look at this little triangle. So we know this distance, which is 5, right? For this triangle. Now all what I need to do is simply find this distance right here from 18 from here to that. And if I can find that, then obviously, I will be able to do it. But I don't know what the distance is, unfortunately. But you can always find the slope. The slope is no problem as long as you know what the line is, and as long as you do it on a graph paper and you have all the numbers available to you. But unfortunately, right here, I don't know if this is drawn to scale. I don't know the exact numbers. So, I have a problem there. But the slope, you can compute it. There's no problem. And I guess the author probably has all the numbers and knows exactly what he's doing. So he was able to get this 0.33. So it's not something that the author chose. This is something that, the author was able to determine from the opportunity cost of producing at autarky. The same thing here, the opportunity cost of producing automobile for Canada at its autarky position. You simply have to draw this triangle, I guess. And any triangle, by the way, would do it as long as you have all the numbers. So if I knew what this is, I could relay this all the way down here and there. So if I know this distance and that distance, then I'll be able to determine what the slope is. So measuring the slope is not a big deal once you have the proper tools, I guess. Unfortunately for us, we don't have that. So we don't know if these graphs are drawn to scale, and we don't have the right numbers or the complete numbers in order to be able to do that. But that's beside the point. The point is the opportunity cost of producing at autarky for the US is 0.33. The opportunity cost for producing at autarky in Canada is equal to 3. And therefore, the world price has to be somewhere between these two. And the author has chosen 1 to be the world price of autos. In other words, 1 for 1. Okay. And we have already said that this is the point where the US will stop production. Why they will stop there? Simply because the world price is exactly equal. The world price is obviously measured by the slope of this line. This is the terms of trade line, which has a slope of 1. Okay? And this is the world price, which is 1. So the world price, terms of trade, CPL line, they're all exactly the same, and they happen to be represented by this line right there. So once the opportunity cost of producing autos is exactly equal to the world price, we're going to stop right there. So the US has decided to produce 12 autos and 14 wheat. This is the production of the US. Under autarky, they were producing 5. Now, because they have a comparative advantage in autos, they more than doubled their production of autos. They went from 5 to 12. And because they don't have a comparative advantage in wheat, they went down in their production from 18 to 14. They were producing 18 under autarky. Now they're producing only 14. Okay? We come to Canada and we do the same thing. Under autarky, Canada was producing 17 autos and 6 wheat. But Canada has a comparative advantage in wheat. Therefore, Canada will move up its PPF, producing more wheat and less autos. And they will continue to produce more wheat than before until they reach a point where the world price of wheat is exactly equal to the opportunity cost of wheat. Now remember, the opportunity cost of wheat here is simply the inverse of 3. That's the domestic price of wheat for Canada, which is the inverse of 3, which is 1/3. And obviously, the world price of wheat is 1. So now, obviously, Canada will keep moving up from its domestic price of 1/3 of wheat versus the 1 price of wheat. So obviously, what does this say to Canada in as far as wheat production is concerned? Should they produce more wheat or less? If the world price is 1 and their cost of production is 1/3, should they produce more wheat or less?
More.
More, exactly, because 1/3 is less than 1. It costs them only 1/3 to produce wheat, whereas the world market, they have to pay 1. So they're gonna go up and produce more wheat. But in the process, the cost of production of wheat is going to increase in Canada, right? This is what we said with increasing opportunity cost. And it will keep on increasing until the domestic production of wheat in Canada and the world price of Canada are exactly equal. And they are equal at this point, because at this point, the domestic price is 1, the world price is 1. Everyone got that?
Yes.
Very good. So basically, this is what it is. In fact, in as far as determining consumption points, production points, and change in consumption, change in production as a result of trade when both countries are facing increasing opportunity cost. So you see, for example, for the US will increase its production of autos, but will not completely specialize, and will also produce a little bit of wheat. Same thing with Canada. With Canada, they will increase their production of wheat simply because they have a comparative advantage in wheat, and they will stop right there, but they will also continue to produce some automobiles. So in fact, for the US, they end up producing 12 automobiles and 14 wheat. But they will consume somewhere on their TT line or on their CPL line. And in this case, of course, the author again has chosen where the consumption point would be. And the author is simply saying here to us that both the US and Canada have agreed to trade 7 autos for 7 wheat. So this is something given to us. This is how we get to this point, consumption point in both countries. So for the US, they're gonna go up, all the way up on their CPL line. For Canada, they will come down all the way here on their CPL line. So let's see what happens here. We have already said that both countries agreed on trading 7 wheat for 7 autos. So if the US is producing 12 autos and they want to trade 7 autos, so how many autos do they have left?
5.
5, very good. So I'm gonna have 1 point right here to represent this new consumption point, 5. Now, how many wheat was the US producing?
14.
14. Now, how many extra wheat are they gonna have with their trade?
7.
7, very good. So 7 plus 14,
21.
21. So that's exactly where the 21 is. So I have my consumption point right there, which I know if I am consuming right here, I am better off regardless. Why? Because I'm consuming somewhere beyond my PPF. Okay? So for the US to be better off, they have to be consuming outside. So they will consume here, 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 here. If they were consuming here, no. Or if they were consuming there, no. They're still on their PPF. So, nothing, there is no improvement. But as long as they consume beyond their PPF, this simply tells me that they are better off. And the US is right here beyond its PPF. So the US is doing good. Okay, let's come to Canada. Now, once we have determined the trade relationship, then whatever we have here, we must apply here. In other words, we still have to go with 7 for 7. 7 autos for 7 wheat, because imports must equal exports. So let's come to Canada here. We said that Canada will produce 13 autos and will produce 13 wheat. And we also said that Canada will export 7 wheat for 7 autos. So if Canada is producing 13 and they want to export 7, how many wheat do they have left?
6.
6, very good. So we come right here, we have 1 point. Now, Canada was producing 13 autos, but now with trade, they're gonna have extra. How many extra autos?
7.
20.
7. So altogether that makes it 20. 13 plus 7. Okay? So now we have this point on the CPL line, which corresponds to 20 autos and 6 wheat, which is way beyond the PPF. So Canada and the US are better off as a result of trade, even when they are not completely specializing in the production of the good that they have a competitive advantage in. And even when they are facing increasing opportunity cost, there will be a point on their PPF that will give them better gains from trade. Is this understood? And this is basically, in summary, what the increased cost is all about. If you understood that, then you should be able to answer any question that comes your way. Now, obviously, in the exam, I'm not going to be asking you to find the slope. Well, that would be given to you, because if I want to do that, then I have to give you all the numbers here, and I have to really connect the tangent lines all the way up to the x-axis and all the way down to the y-axis. So, it's, so I won't do that. But, in the exam, obviously, I will give you the opportunity cost for producing each good. And well, it's a little bit difficult actually to ask you a question whereby you will not be given any of this information, because it will be impossible to find. But if I give you all of that information, then obviously you'll be able to find it. But we'll see. We will talk about that in the review when we have a review. And I will probably, because right now I really haven't written any questions for the midterm, but by the time we have the review, I would have already written down the questions. Now, most of the questions are my questions, by the way. So I'm really not going to be copying from test banks or anything, except for multiple choice. A lot of them will be from test banks, but for short answer questions, they will all be my questions. So you can rest assured that we will go over them in the review, and you will have a very good idea of what questions to expect, and probably also know the answer to them, because I will answer them in the review for you. Anyway, okay, so This is really something that we went over, production gains, consumption gains. And here, of course, everything that we said on the graph is simply translated in table form. So you know exactly how much each country is producing under autarky, how much each country is producing after specialization, how much each country is consuming, etc. So we went over all of that. I mean, you know, you can always go back to it on your PowerPoints and check things for yourself, but we have done all of that. And we also talked about partial specialization and why we have partial specialization. You know, the reasons for partial, you know, not all goods and services are traded internationally. And so, you know, we're forced to actually produce some of those goods for ourselves. And then the differing taste for products, because of product differentiation, countries will end up producing some of the goods that they don't have a comparative advantage in, but they can make up the loss in comparative advantage by simply telling consumers that, hey, you can't compare this good with the other goods simply because our good is much more superior because of quality or, you know, whatever the case may be. So product differentiation here obviously does affect things. And then when we talk about trade and its effect on jobs, it's very important to note this. And I've been saying it all along. The main purpose of trade is simply to make every country use its resources most efficiently. That's the purpose of trade. So the purpose of trade is really not to create jobs or destroy jobs. That's not why we trade with one another. We trade with one another for the simple reason because by trading, we can use our resources most efficiently. Now, when it comes to jobs, the creation of jobs, that's the function of the government through the use of macroeconomic policies. So what determines the unemployment rate is really not trade, but rather it's the macroeconomic policies used by governments. Now, trade may actually change the mix of jobs within an economy. That's possible. And it may actually destroy certain industries and promote other industries. That's also possible. But the overall level of employment will stay the same regardless. In other words, it will not affect the overall level of employment. Trade does not do that. There are other factors that will affect the overall level of employment, and that's monetary and fiscal policy, basically. So this, we have to be clear about that. So whenever you hear pundits talk about trade and jobs on TV or whatever, and they say, well, yeah, the reason why we're having a lot of people out of a job is simply because of trade, because of globalization. That's not true. Trade has nothing to do with jobs. The overall level of jobs, no. Trade has nothing to do with it. It's all about macroeconomic policy. Okay. And, you know, economists have done a lot of studies. So there are basically empirical evidence to suggest that trade does not affect the overall level of employment. And here you can see, for example, this solid line shows imports as a percentage of GDP. So you can see over the years, imports have been increasing as a percentage of GDP. So the US is importing more and more and more every year. And this broken line shows the unemployment rate. So obviously I cannot draw a trend for unemployment. There is no such thing as a trend. We were able to do a trend here for imports, but for unemployment, the trend is basically cyclical. Okay, it goes up and down. So very, very difficult to draw a trend for that. However, what this is telling me is that basically there is no correlation between unemployment and imports. No correlation whatsoever. In other words, you can see here, for example, when imports are increasing, unemployment is falling. And you can see here where imports are increasing, unemployment is also increasing. Therefore, what do we deduce from all of this data? That there is basically no correlation between trade and unemployment. And those are empirical data that economists have used to show that there is no such thing as a correlation between trade and unemployment. Okay. This is a case study, of course, for those of you who would like to, understand more about what's happening with trade and certain industries. You can read this. It's very interesting. It simply shows you the what happened to Rubbermaid, which is a manufacturing company that produces consumer goods that use plastics, like for example, plastic food storage containers, laundry baskets, etc. All of these goods were made by Rubbermaid, and Rubbermaid was based in Wooster, Ohio, very small town in Ohio. What happened was that when the raisin prices skyrocketed in 1995, and raisin here is simply the raw material that you need to produce plastic. That's what raisin is. It's the raw material for producing plastic. When the prices of raisin skyrocketed, then what Rubbermaid did is that it tried to pass this price increases to its customers. So Walmart, who is a huge customer of Rubbermaid, said, you know what? Well, we can't do this. Well, we can't pay higher prices. I'm sorry. You're having a problem with the raisin. Well, that's your problem. What we can do is we're going to buy these products from overseas at a much lower cost, simply because countries overseas can save or can compensate for this rise in raisin by lower labor costs. And as a result, they're not going to increase their cost to us. So Walmart severed its relationship, to make the story short. Rubbermaid was actually purchased by a new corporation, the Newell Corporation, which is known for its cost cutting. And immediately they cut about 1,000 jobs, basically. And, that really hurt Worcester. And Worcester became a ghost town, basically, as a result of Rubbermaid falling and Newell Corporation taking over and deciding to move its plants from Worcester, Ohio, to other parts of the country, which obviously made things worse for Worcester. So, you can look at that and see exactly what trade can do for certain sectors of the economy, for certain industries. Yes, it has an effect, but not for the overall picture. Okay, now this one, comparative advantage extended to many products and countries. We're really not interested in that. We are not interested in that either. Now, coming back to the Ricardian model and looking at the empirical evidence of the Ricardian model. In other words, does the Ricardian model predict exactly what would happen when countries trade with one another? Does the Ricardo model tell us that the countries with the lower labor costs will be able to produce that good and export it to the country that obviously does not have a labor cost advantage? And a lot of economists actually did work on this. McDougall, for example, in 1951, looked at about 25 industries in the US and the UK. He examined all these 25 industries and he found that 20 out of 25 industries actually fit the predicted pattern by the Ricardo model. So in other words, countries were exporting those goods that they had a comparative advantage in and imported those goods that they had a comparative disadvantage in. So obviously, that's good news for the Ricardo model because these are things that economists have studied and have produced empirical evidence to the support of the Ricardo model. I'm sorry. And then, of course, we have Bellessa and Stern also did some studies in the late 70s for many industries. And they found that basically what you see happening is that most of the studies done by Bellessa and Stern actually supported the Ricardo conclusions, again, based on trade patterns and based on competitive advantage and opportunity cost. So, and then still, you had more tests being done on the Ricardo model in the 1980s now by Stephen Gullop. And he also found that relative unit labor costs happen to actually dictate the trade pattern of US vis-a-vis the UK, Japan, Germany, Canada, and Australia. So obviously he did a much extensive work here and included a lot of countries in the mix. And again, he came up with the same conclusions as the Ricardo conclusion. So, you know, the Ricardian model has a lot of support. In other words, all the tests results seem to be positive for the Ricardo model. However, the Ricardo model does have its limitations. Now, what are the limitations? First of all, labor is not the only input. And second of all, labor is not homogeneous. And there are other things that affect production costs besides labor. And there is also the quality factor that has to be taken into consideration, which obviously the Ricardo model does not. So there are a few limitations here and there, but overall, I think the Ricardo model serves its purpose in trying to determine trade patterns, which is pretty good for an archaic model that was developed back in the 1800s to actually still be in existence and still to be going full force, which, you know, is, that tells you something about the power of the Ricardo model. It's pretty powerful. And also, you know, the studies have also shown the correlation between labor unit costs and exports. So, you know, this is a scatter plot that was used by economists to determine the relationship between unit labor costs between countries and the exports of these countries. So, in other words, on the horizontal axis, what we are measuring here is US Japanese unit labor costs. So it is US over Japanese labor costs. So as we go down this way, that simply means US labor costs are becoming more expensive relative to Japanese as we go down this way. And as we go up this way, this simply represents US Japanese exports. So if we go up this way, that simply means the US is exporting more than Japan is. So when we relate these two, when we see that there is a negative relationship from this scatter plot, what does that tell us? That simply tells us that as labor costs become more expensive in the US will be exporting less to Japan. That's the negative relationship. That's what the negative relationship is showing. which is what the Ricardo model has predicted. So obviously, the Ricardo model again is in full swing.
Wait, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that again about what you just said?
Yeah, the negative relationship between labor costs and exports, which means here from this graph, you see that the trend is downward sloping, right? That's what this gray area is showing. It's downward sloping, which means that there is a negative relationship between whatever you're measuring on the vertical and whatever you're measuring on the horizontal. So what are we measuring on the horizontal? We're simply measuring relative labor costs between the US and Japan. And what are we measuring here on the vertical? We're simply measuring relative exports, US versus Japan. So when this increases, this simply means that the US is doing more exports than Japan is. And if we go down, this simply means that the US is doing less exports. Similarly here, if we're going this direction, we're simply saying that US labor costs are a lot higher than Japan labor costs. And if we go this direction, we're saying the opposite. So when there is a negative relationship here, all what this is telling me is that as US labor costs increase, US exports fall. Okay, is this clear? As US labor costs increase, US exports versus Japan falls. As US labor costs fall, US exports increase. So there is a negative relationship between relative labor costs and relative exports. Understood or still not very clear?
I get it now. Thank you.
Okay. All right, let's see now. And these are simply some of the main arguments of the trade model, the Ricardo model. In other words, for the world as a whole, free trade will always result in higher level of output and income. And this is exactly what we've been showing so far. Then would occur under the absence of free trade. It allows each individual nation to achieve higher level of production and consumption than would be achieved in autarky. So that's basically something that we all agree to based on the studies we made. And these are simply lists additional benefits of free trade. It deters monopoly, fosters innovation, yields wider range of product choice, reduces international political hostilities. So all of that is basically part of globalization. It's part of countries coming together to trade with one another and to have more economic relationship, which would lead to better political relationships, etc. Okay, now obviously global supply chains, we're really not going to go too much into that because that's a very simple idea and it really doesn't need any explanation from me. If you just read it, I guess, you know, probably the book will do a better explanation. And I will leave the explanation to spend more explanation on the graphs, on the models. That's really where I excel in. But when it comes to concepts, I mean, these concepts are pretty straightforward, very clear. And when we talk about global supply chains, what do we mean by that? We simply mean that the globalization is one reason why we have a global supply chain. Why? Because now we have more international production networks that will allow firms to move goods and services efficiently across national borders. That's what global supply chains do. In other words, each country will pitch in. Each country will provide a part of the production process. So the fragmentation of production into separate processes, if you will, have actually made this global supply chain to be extremely successful. And China has taken advantage of that, of the global supply chains. In other words, China has invested heavily in promoting and developing global supply chains. So you see, every country is sending their components to be assembled in China, basically. Japan is sending a part of the components that is needed, let's say for iPhone, to China. Sweden is sending some of the components needed for iPhone to China. South Korea is sending some components that's needed for the iPhone to China. So China is able to put this supply chain together. This is known as the global supply chains, where all countries are actually involved in producing a particular good. So now with global supply chains, there is no longer the made in China or made in the US. It really is irrelevant. It doesn't mean anything, because nowadays most countries are involved in producing a particular good, even though on the packet or on the package or whatever box or whatever it is, it says made in the US or made in China. This doesn't mean anything, because deep down you know that many countries were actually responsible for producing this good as a result of the global supply chains. So that's basically what the global supply chains is all about. And subcontracting and outsourcing are part of the global supply chains. So there are advantages, of course, of this global supply chains or outsourcing. It will reduce cost. It will obviously increase competitiveness. It will create new industries and products. All of this is basically what happens with global supply chains, what global supply chains result in. And, you know, countries are taking advantage of all of that. So I guess, you know, I'm just going to stop right there because I'm going over the time allotted here, but are there any questions before I close?
Nope.
No, thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, then all of you have a nice weekend, and I'll see you on Thursday. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Take care. Bye-bye.
When are you gonna post the grid for the homework?
When will we post the grade? Well, I still have some students submitting the homework because we have till 11:58 tonight, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was due last night.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, I thought it was due on the 9th at 11.
Yeah, well, you're on Titanium. It said it's already closed, I believe.
Oh, does it? Well, I'm gonna check there and see. If it is,
Yeah,
then obviously I need to grade them and I need to post the grades. So probably
Yeah.
you will see your grades this weekend. I'll
And
work on it
what is a good, how should we like study for the exam? Like notes?
Yeah, notes will be good, PowerPoints, and I suggest also, you know, try to read the chapter, because don't wait till the exam to read the chapters. That's too late. Start reading the chapters now, and then, you know, once you read the chapter, go to your PowerPoints and go to your notes and make comparisons. And then if you have any questions, jot them down on a piece of paper. And then when you come to the session, then ask those questions. This is, you know, the way I would do it if I had to study for the exam. In other words, I want to be prepared. I don't want to leave any gray areas. I want to read the book, the chapter, make sure that I understand the most important things. You know, don't focus on the things that we don't cover.
Yeah.
You see that, you know, there are a lot of things I really brush aside, you know, I don't look at them. So don't focus on those. Focus on the things that we talk about in class.
So that's why it's better to read the chapter before we get into class, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So we get an idea of what's coming in the lecture.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's good to read the chapter, then go over the PowerPoints. The PowerPoints are pretty good, by the way. I really like the way he puts them together. You know, they're very clear, and, you know, It's as good as reading the chapter, by the way. Sometimes I
Yeah,
find
by the way, the chapter is not even that, like reading that book is not that bad. It's actually a pretty good book.
yeah, it's a good book. It's a good one. I mean, you know, I compared a lot of other international economics, and I picked this one for the simple reason because I found it to be very simple. I used the book about 10 years ago, and that book was a disaster, was a nightmare. I mean, you know, that book was supposed to be for graduate students, basically. And the reason why I picked it is because, you know, the department said, well, this is the book we want to go with. And I said, well, you know, let me go through it. And when I went through it, I said, only this time, not next time. I'm not going to use it, period. You know, I don't care what the department says, but I'm not going to use it. Because some books are simply too difficult to read. And the author
Yeah,
is
exactly.
not very clear.
Yeah, this is a really good, easy read. I actually
Yeah.
just like start reading all of them, and yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's good, good. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
All right, thanks, Professor. You have a good
Okay,
weekend.
guys, have a good weekend. I'll see
Thank
you
you,
on
Professor.
Tuesday.
See ya.
Yep, see you on Tuesday.
All right.